Welcome to Periop Talk. I'm Johnny Marr, Ambulatory Perioperative Education Specialist at AORN.
Hi, I'm Janine Watson. I'm the Senior Manager of the Ambulatory Surgery Division at AORN.
Today, we're speaking with Grace. She's a perioperative nurse who transitioned from the hospital environment to an ASC. So we're going to discuss that transition a little bit more, as well as some of the pros and the cons of it. So if you're thinking about switching to an ASC or you've already recently made the switch, today's episode can provide some great insights. Grace, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I kind of want to start at the beginning of your journey. You were working in the hospital for several years. What did you like most about that?
I really liked the dynamic environment of the hospital and working with different parts of the multidisciplinary team between anesthesiologists and surgeons. And it was just a fast-paced, high-stress environment where anything can happen at any time. So you really got to be able to prepare for worst-case scenarios. Obviously not expecting it, but still prepare for it. And so I definitely love that part about working in the hospital.
Yeah, so ASCs, they're very fast-paced too. Was that something that prompted you to move to the ASC? What was your reason for leaving the hospital?
It was more so the schedule. I was supposed to be working on-call shifts. And so on top of the regular Monday to Friday day shifts, we were expected to do on-call shifts on weekends and weeknights. And that can be anywhere between 8 to 24 hours. So it was really challenging for me to bounce back from a 12-hour night shift to a regular 8-hour day shift like the next day or even a couple of days later.
Yeah, it's hard to focus with no sleep.
Most definitely.
And so after you left the hospital, you went to the ASC, did you notice any major differences, maybe in patient acuity, the types of procedures you were circulating, those sorts of things?
Yes. The surgery center obviously has a lot healthier patients. You're expecting them to go home the same day. And so the surgical cases were, to me, it felt a lot easier. And there were a lot of other challenges too, like learning how to give conscious sedation for patients who are receiving pain injections. And so there was a lot of newer things to learn. Although I will say now, 3 years working into the surgery center, it's starting to look more like a main OR where we're increasing surgical capacity. So that's another exciting thing, new challenge to look forward to.
Yeah, lots to learn with bringing on new service lines for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Grace, when we think about the day-to-day of a periop nurse and you think about where your ASC now is and where you were in the hospital, are there many differences in what you actually do? We understand there's difference in complexity and patient acuity, but what about the day-to-day? Were there major differences in the ASC?
There were, for the most part, I would say the core skills of being an OR between the main hospital and the surgery center are the same. Principles stay the same. However, the day-to-day minute details are definitely different. It took some time getting used to the fast turnover and really trying to manage the entire day, looking at the entire journey of the patient preoperatively and postoperatively, and not just intraoperatively.
So you couldn't have anticipated that before moving from the hospital.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. So when we think about people who are considering moving from a hospital, what would you say are factors that they should consider knowing what you know now?
Factors to consider, I would say. I'd say you'd probably have to consider trying to manage the logistics throughout the whole day and thinking like about multiple surgeries and being adaptable and flexible with trying to figure out what the surgeon needs in the moment and at the same time preparing for the next case.
It sounds like from what you were talking about the hospital that there's a lot more resources in the hospital that maybe do those things for you. Do you think that's a big difference or that impacts your consideration? Do you want to be part of the turnover team? Do you want to be doing all those extra roles?
Yeah, I would say in the surgery center, there's definitely more of a collaborative effort because you just got to get things going. And so being able to wear different hats is a necessity, for sure.
So, what skills from the hospital do you think were more transferable to the ASC? You talk about the core skills, but was there anything else that you really felt like, boy, I'm sure glad I learned this in the hospital coming to the ASC?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really feel that being able to learn different things is a skill in of itself. Because even if you're thrown with a different challenge, the ability to be flexible and just to know how to learn certain things will really take anyone different places, not just in nursing, but like so. For example, where I was before, I was never trained in the orthopedic service, and now we are bringing joint replacement cases to where we're working, and I'm learning how to both circulate and scrub those cases, which is a completely different animal from the open abdominal cases that I'm used to.
So, what do you think? Was it a skill set or a mindset of going into the ASC? Did you have to learn a bunch of new skills or did you really have to change the way you thought about your approach?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Because I'd say it's both equal parts, but if I had to pick one or the other, it's definitely mindset. Because coming into a case and having that mindset of okay, we're going to learn something today, it's going to be great. Things are going to happen where obviously it could have gone better, but at least I learned something. Going to do better for the future. And then when you really get the flow, it becomes a nice dance, and then you feel like fulfilled or it feels rewarding to have like finally accomplish something or tackle that challenge.
I like that. I think sometimes the perception is that people leave the hospital because they don't want to work as hard, or the call is obviously one of them. But I think the fact that you do have to learn quite a bit of new skill sets and new processes and really own a lot of those, I think makes it maybe very different. So, what was the biggest surprise or aha moment that you got in the ASC that was different from the hospital for you?
The biggest aha moment. I I will say it's really hard for me to pick just one
Okay.
because every day looks sort of different. I like a lot of variety. And so I specifically went to my charge nurse to put me in different services, which I know not a lot of surgery centers have different service lines there. But whenever there's something new, there I think they're always asking me, is this something that you want to learn? Is this something that you'd want to do? So I don't know, biggest aha moment. Maybe it's because I was always looking for that high stress, like fast paced environment. So I was always trying to look for that challenge. And that at the surgery center, oh, I guess this is my biggest aha moment. It's since it's starting to look like more of a main OR, meaning it's getting more complex cases, but still healthier patients. It's yeah, there's just a lot of opportunity for growth.
I like that. And so you're still able to get that adrenaline rush and be excited and nervous and scared about things, but not at the same level at the hospital.
Yeah, thank you.
I
Well,
love that.
Yeah, it sounds like too you're getting that good work-life balance as well.
yes, most definitely. I think coming into the surgery center or at work and knowing exactly what's going to happen throughout the day, like your assignments, and then knowing the predictability of the schedule at work, outside of work, it really helps me focus and be present in the moment.
That's great. I'm sure that probably helps you be able to learn new skills and open up your mindset and have that better mindset too. And you can think more clearly about how the full picture of the day is going to look.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Grace, you made the switch to an ASC. I made a switch to an ASC. Janine made the switch to the ASC. I think we all had our reasons for doing so. There's lots of nurses out there that are wondering, is that the right move for me? Should I make the switch from the hospital to the ASC? What would you tell them?
I would have to ask where they're at in their career first. If they're just beginning, they'd have to think about their longer term goals. And so I feel that at a surgery center, there's a lot of structure. So there's a lot of good things where you can really know intricate details about surgery as a nurse. At the same time, there is not a lot of opportunity to handle a lot of emergency cases because that doesn't happen too frequently in the surgery centers. And so I would say as a new grad, I'd highly recommend trying out both if you're able to go in and take a peek, because I know some facilities do that. And it just depends on that person's personality. Maybe they really like fast-paced environments or high stress environments, or maybe they'd rather have more structure in the beginning.
I know for me, I really loved the hospital and the resources. I liked that we had a turnover team come in and help us clean the room, and I could take my patient off and really just focus on my role. And then when I moved to the ASC, I was the nurse manager checking the elevator. And I'm like, what am I doing here? But then I really thought I get bored easily. And so it really allowed me to learn lots of new things and do different activities. If I really wasn't at a point where I could sit and work on a computer, or I really wasn't at a point where I wanted to be in patient care, I could go do those other things with a lot of independence. Now, the downside of it is I did have to learn the hard way on certain things and made mistakes. But I think that was the balance for me as I was learning something new. And I really did get to build on the foundation that I learned working in the hospital, because in the ASC, I just didn't have near the resources.
Most definitely. I will say at the surgery center, I've had the opportunity to learn a lot of other services more in detail and in depth. And then not just the surgical cases, but like what you said, we'd have to troubleshoot technology. We were our own AV person. The vendor was unavailable because they were in the main hospital, and it took priority over us. So you really do have to figure things out and just do it for the patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little, sorry, Johnny, I think that's a little bit of where that excitement in the hospital. So it's not necessarily emergency. Somebody's not coming in as a level 2 trauma or a level 1 trauma, but you've got an issue that you've got to fix in order to proceed or provide the care you need. And so you have to start thinking outside the box. And so I think that's challenging and fun.
Oh, most definitely. I feel like that's a completely different challenge in itself. And depending on what case you're in, really have to think on your feet and be quick.
For sure. And I think that's where the experience comes in. If you've got those core periop skills, then you can transfer them. I think that's the one thing I would be cautious of in really small centers without resources and a lot of people to learn from. If you have a limited experience, it might be a little bit more challenging for you, I think.
Yes, I completely wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because you could be trained in perioperative nursing, but when you get to the ASC, you're now being cross-trained into working pre-op and then PACU and so much more involved in that total patient experience that you might not have been used to before. So just kind of being open to learning that, and then sort of having that foundational experience from the hospital, I think can go a long way. And when you bring up the point about resources, I always just think about how, if you take the last one of something, it's not going to replace itself. Like in the hospital, it just magically reappears. You need to be the one to take ownership of it and make sure before you get down to that last one that those things are restocked, so you don't mess up the rest of your day.
So true, Johnny. So true.
Yeah, there's there's a lot of things that my coworkers and I joke about a lot. It's like, oh, like there is no such thing as that's not my job, because we're all a team.
Right.
Got to do it and figure it out together.
I remember being the pre-op nurse, the operating rooms, the PACU nurse, the overnight nurse, and cleaning the the instruments and sterile processing, all in the same shift, on the same day.
Multi-tool.
I thought my days of wiping down toilets would be done when I transferred to the ASC, but there's still lots of cleaning to be done as well.
And unclogging them.
Well, Grace, thank you so much for sharing your story today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and speaking with us. And we know that the things you shared today are going to be some great insights for nurses that are kind of contemplating whether they should move to an ASC. So again, thank you so much for speaking.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with both of you.
That was really great of Grace to share her story and her insights about transitioning from the hospital to the ASC. Something that really stood out with me is how she kind of mentioned the schedule predictability, having that work-life balance and how important that can be. Janine, when you started working at the ASC, what did you like most about it?
I think I liked the independence and the autonomy and the ability to really work through day-to-day problems that sometimes they were nursing problems and sometimes they were just logistic problems. I really liked that. I liked learning all the new things and the aspects of not just the care delivery that I was giving, but the business side of it and the financial side of it, which you pay much more attention to in the ASC. And the last thing I think was my favorite is the whole team really had some sort of ownership, right? Like everybody really was a team and we all had the same goals and able to work together. So rowing in a boat in the same direction with your team is so much easier and more enjoyable.
Yeah, especially too when, maybe it's a physician-owned center, when people have some vested interest in making that ASC really succeed, knowing that this is your work environment and you're responsible for making it the best work culture you can make it, right?
Yeah. And I think, at the hospital, when the hospital does well, it never really comes down to your individual work. In the ASC, when the ASC does well, you know that you had a big part in that. And I think there's a lot of pride that you can take, which helps contribute to the ownership in the ASC as well.
Yeah, even being able to connect that missing piece from the hospital. How did my patient end up doing? You kind of don't really always see what happens, and it kind of feels like there's something missing there. But at least in the ASC, you're able to see them get discharged, right? You're able to see them waking up and talking and doing better again. And then you're able to even see that feedback come back from those patient surveys and be able to read that feedback and see just how impactful your care was that you gave to that person and see kind of how much better they're doing. Even that post-op phone call, just being able to speak with them on the phone a day or two later and hear that they're doing better, how they're doing is nice. It kind of gives you that conclusion of patient care.
Absolutely. I think to that point, we used to get a lot of patients that would bring in cookies and cakes and candy.
Yes.
And just to tell us what a great experience they had. And you don't always get to see that at the hospital. So that is nice.
Yes. I certainly gained more weight at the ASC than I did at the
There's
hospital.
that.
Well, we've shared our story. We'd love to hear from everyone else. What's your motivation for moving to an ASC? Or if you're already moved to an ASC, what do you love about it? What do you love about being in the ASC? Share it in the comments below. And thanks for listening to this episode of Periop Talk.
See you next time.